Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi will be traveling to Russia from today to 2nd December for the 20th round of China-Russia strategic security consultations. The visit comes at the invitation of Secretary of the Russian Federation Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, reflecting the deepening bilateral security ties between the two countries. Mourners gather in Hong Kong as the death toll from the Taipei blaze climbs up to 128 people, with 150 people still unaccounted for, while police begin a block-by-block search as Beijing launches a nationwide fire safety inspection. Authorities warn that the number of victims could rise further as searches of the worst-hit buildings have yet to begin. Beijing celebrates the Long March 7A rocket's 13th flight and the launch of new Shijian satellite from Wenchang. The mission is China's 77th rocket launch of this year and the 611th Long March operation, as China announced a new government regulator to strengthen its rapidly growing private space industry, showing China's expanding capacity in space sector. China has declared that it has never accepted the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco, with Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning stating that the agreement signed without China or the Soviet Union is illegal and null and a void on all the matters, including Taiwan's sovereignty. The new Super report says revenues at China's major military firms fell in 2023 to 24 as corruption purges slowed arms contracts and stalled Xi Jinping's modernization drive. The 10% revenue drop stands in sharp contrast to global growth, including a 40% surge in Japan and 31% surge of South Korean in arms revenues. Taiwan's Apex Aviation is offering surveillance flights using US-made radar to help track Chinese warships as Taipei expands defense strategy amid growing military pressure. The Taiwan government plans to lift defense spending to 5% of their GDP by 2030 and adds a $40 billion supplementary budget for new US arms and civil military cooperation. China's military and Coast Guard conducted patrols around Scarborough Shoal on Saturday, with state media saying the operations aim to resolutely safeguard Beijing's claimed sovereignty and maritime rights. Meanwhile, the Philippine embassy in Beijing has not yet commented on this latest escalation in the South China Sea. Zootopia 2 has shattered records in China, grossing $275 million in just 6 days to become the China's highest-grossing foreign animated movie ever. Despite Hollywood's overall limited influence, Disney's push, including Shanghai's unique Zootopia-themed land, has helped fuel its massive opening. Now we start this hour with Hong Kong. A solemn vigil has been held tonight at Victoria Park to honor the lives of domestic workers lost in devastating apartment fire. Mourners lit candles and offered prayers for victims, who included at least 7 Indonesians and 1 Filipino person, according to their respective consulates. Authorities report the overall death toll from the blaze has now risen to 146 people. Organizers say the gathering aimed to recognize the vital contributions of migrant workers and to call for improved safety and living conditions. Let's listen in.
Say that they want to give a big support to the family member and also everyone who affected by the fire, but there is no clear direction. How about migrant domestic worker? Do they also have the same thing, the same treatment from the local people? And also how the family member can access the compensation or any kind of support from the Hong Kong government. So I think that Hong Kong government need to make very clear and direction information that everyone can
Dan saya
understand.
berharap ini adalah kejadian pertama dan terakhir kali. Semoga kedepannya tidak terjadi lagi dan semoga korban-korban yang menjadi korban di kebakaran Taipo segera bisa ditemukannya. Itu saja.
Now, for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Andrew K.B. Long. He's an independent Chinese strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us again. Good to see you. Andrew, what is developing and what's more has come out from this Hong Kong fire?
Well, there is has been an exemplar outpouring of solidarity from a civil society in Hong Kong, including NGOs, volunteers, various associations, as well as domestic helpers groups. First of all, to pay respect for the unfortunate, for the disease, but also to show solidarity. There was also a great deal of material donated by volunteers and organizations and businesses all over the place, including those outside Hong Kong, for example, neighboring Guangdong, Macau, and various other places. In addition to expressions of condolences from world leaders, including the Pope and King Charles and other national leaders. I think that this is an example of how vibrant Hong Kong society has become, but also the government is pulling those stops because immediately there are already 1,500 victims already housed in permanent accommodation. And don't forget there are 2,000 families and 2,000 flats, even though not all of them have been affected, but most of them are. In addition to immediate housing and various donations amounting to over 1.2 billion Hong Kong dollars. So each victim is receiving something like at least 6,000 US dollars cash, together with, and then there are a number of hotels offering them free accommodation. And the government has pledged that all those housed, and in fact, none of the victims is left homeless. They are either in shelters or already housed in permanent accommodation. And the government has pledged that they can live rent-free for as long as it takes to rebuild their homes. And then, of course, those high-rise blocks have been recently inspected. Initial findings that there are no immediate danger. And then the structural security remains relatively sound. But pending further investigation, the government has undertaken either to rebuild all these blocks or to renovate them, and so that all these victims can have regained their homes. So I think that this is an example of civil society efficient government response, while investigations, of course, have been carrying on into possible cases of even corruption amongst the contractors, and who are, of course, held primarily responsible for the loss of lives. And they've been arrested and charged with manslaughter. And also interdepartmental investigations are carrying on to prevent the same catastrophe from happening, including materials, whether the existing standards are adequate, whether the fire equipment is up to the job in modern-day high-rise buildings and very narrow streets characteristic of Hong Kong, whether the scaffolding is safe, and particularly the kind of material covering the buildings whilst under renovation. Although initial tests have shown that examples of this covering meets fire retardant specifications, there is no telling whether, in fact, the reality remains the case because there are so many blocks involved.
Yes.
And one's sample for testing may not represent the whole picture. So all sorts of investigations are carrying on. But meanwhile, there is an outpouring of solidarity, queues of people deep into the night, paying respects, signing condolence books. It almost takes 1 hour to reach from the end of the queue to the top, but still doesn't stop people from all over the place in Hong Kong paying their respect to the unfortunate. So I think that this is a very good example. While there are many challenges remain in Hong Kong, and I think that all these are very positive signs.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for bringing that into our perspective and sharing with us. Andrew, please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to our next news, China and Russia are opening a new round of high-level security talks today. Beijing has confirmed that Wang Yi and the other top foreign affairs officials and a member of China's political bureau will be in Russia for the 20th round of China-Russia strategic security consultations. His two-day visit comes at the invitation of Sergei Shoigu, Secretary of the Russian Federation Security Council. The meetings will be held from December 1st to 2nd, aiming to strengthen coordination on major regional and global issues, as both countries continue to deepen their strategic partnership. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Andrew K.P. Long. He's an independent Chinese strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Andrew, for staying with us. Now, Andrew, looking at this, what risks and opportunities does the strengthening of the China-Russia strategic partnership pose for China's relationship with Europe, particularly as tensions between Russia and, particularly foreign coalition of the willing persist?
There has often been a degree of misunderstanding of the so-called partnership without any bounds between Russia and China. In fact, there are still differences still remain. Don't forget that a large chunk of China's territory was taken from the Qing dynasty by Tsarist Russia. That represents half of the Russian Far East. And of course, since then, the border disputes have been resolved between China and Russia. And then both countries have been tied at the hip economically and mutually dependent long before the Ukraine war. For example, Russia is the world's largest exporter of energy and agricultural products, including fertilizers, and China remains the world's largest customer. So the two countries are economically interdependent, and that happened, of course, long before the Ukraine war. Now, after the Ukraine war, China doesn't want to be seen to be supporting the invasion of Ukraine because that tramples upon a fundamental principle of China or Beijing, which is territorial integrity. After all, Ukraine is a country recognized by the United Nations. Under the United Nations Charter, territorial integrity is sacrosanct. Now, the visit of Wang Yi to Russia is to coordinate their responses in the Security Council, on the one hand, because the question of Ukraine's peace deal, the so-called 28 points, is coming up, even though European countries find certain aspects or key aspects not acceptable. But at the end of the day, I think that the power dictates because the Ukrainians have lost a lot of bodies and is dependent on European financial support. And even though there is much hype about European support, if you look at the figures, the total amount of money from the Europeans only accounts for 0.1% of Ukraine's economy. So this is unsustainable without American support. And of course, President Trump wants to pull the rug from under the Ukrainians and forcing this 28 points on Ukraine. Now, of course, the whole world wants the Ukraine war to stop, including China. And Russia wants it to stop as well, provided that they retain their gains in the Donbass area, because in the Donbass area, most of the citizens have been Russian, and they're Russian speaking for a long, long time. And of course, even taking advantage of the situation to consolidate their territorial gains. Now, at the end of the day, some sort of not necessarily recognition, but acceptance of the facts on the ground would be necessary to cease the war. It's in fact not an agreement, is some sort of an armistice. And don't forget, for example, in Korea, between North and South Korea, the war has never formally ended. It's just an armistice. Armistice means a peace deal, freezing the situation on the ground, and that's what's happening. And that's why Wang Yi is now coordinating with the Russians as to the kind of response should push comes to shove in the United Nations and other international forums.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Andrew K.P. Long for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. According to reports, a sharp drop in revenues for China's biggest military firms is seen. A study by Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says earnings fell about 10% last year as corruption crackdown slowed arms contracts and delayed procurement. The decline stands out as global defense companies saw strong growth driven by the wars in Ukraine and Gaza and rising regional tensions. But in China, major state-owned giants like AVIC, Norinco, and CASC all reported losses, with Norinco hit hardest, down more than 30%. The slowdown follows a sweeping corruption purge that reached the top of the People's Liberation Army, including the Rocket Force. Analysts say the delays could affect timelines for China's new missiles, aircraft, as well as cyber programs. But they add that in the long run, Beijing's investment in military modernization is expected to continue. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Tomohiko Taniguchi. He's a former advisor to late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Taniguchi, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how might this recent corruption purge within PLA and state-owned defense conglomerates reshape China's civil-military relations and central leadership's control over the military industry complex?
First of all, the statistics, the report came from SIPRI, Sweden Institute of Peace Research Institute. That's very much authoritative, well-respected institution. So I think the plunge of the amount of defense procurement in the case of Chinese contractors would be real. And then it may reflect two things. One, the plunge reflects the amount of money corrupt. So that's number one. Number two, even though this is a serious plunge, I think it's going to be a one-off event and short-term event. Mid to long-term, Chinese defense buildup is going to gain momentum even further. So for the Chinese Communist Party and the PLA, corruption is important insofar as it would affect the might and power of PLA per se. The most important thing for the PLA and the Chinese Communist Party would be to keep on strengthening the power and might of the Chinese military.
And what strategic risks does the slowdown, although you said it could be temporary, defense procurement pose for China's, particularly Xi's, near-term military modernization goals?
Bear in mind, because you're looking at a combination of a huge amount of money in the first place, no transparency, no accountability, second, and there is a hierarchical structure because it is military and the Chinese Communist Party. It's going to be hugely difficult for the corruption to be eradicated for the Chinese, and that trend is going to continue. But the bigger trend is, despite these corrupt cases, as I said, the Chinese military buildup is going to be continuing as it has for the last 20, 30 years.
Right, and given that global defense spending is accelerating, how should Beijing recalibrate its defense industry policies to maintain competitiveness without compromising anti-corruption efforts?
One can say the Chinese military is on the cutting edge. Its technological prowess is second to none already, and the gap between the fleets China has and the fleets the combination of the United States and Japan and Australia have are widening. So I don't think the Chinese military officials and the top-ranking officials of the Chinese Communist Party are that much concerned about the plunge of the amount of defense procurement and the corruption that should very well be behind the corruption.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Taniguchi for sharing that insight and expertise with us. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now moving on to Taiwan, flying over the waters off of Taiwan's east coast, a light aircraft equipped with a powerful US-made radar tracks Chinese warships, collecting data its operator is keen to provide to Taipei's security forces. Small Taiwanese operator Apex Aviation is pitching the surveillance flights to a government that has started engaging civilian firms in developing new technologies for its whole of society resilience initiatives. The Taiwanese government has invited businesses, research groups, and other organizations to take on more active roles, including backing up communications and logistics, shoring up cyber defenses, and potentially contributing to surveillance and intelligence gathering. While common in countries such as the United States, this joint military-civilian approach is new for Taiwan, whose armed forces are increasingly hard-pressed responding to daily Chinese incursions in the skies and waters around the island. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi. He's a former advisor to late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Taniguchi, for staying with us. Thank you. Now looking at this, how might Taiwan's growing reliance on civilian military cooperation for surveillance and also resilience, how do you think this influences Japan's own defense planning?
Well, not immediately. The situation in Japan is there is absolutely no interplay between the civilian sector and the Japanese armed forces. But to make a good interconnectedness between the civilian and the military would be of grave interest and grave necessity for Taiwan. Why? Because information intelligence are all about network, and if you have a network effect, then it means that Taiwan has chronically suffered from the lack of the network effect. So to maximize in its own way, the Taiwanese must seek the greater economy of scope by allying with civilian sectors other than the military sector. In the case of Japan, the United States, Australia, the Philippines, they can share intelligence, they can share data among themselves, which is something that the Taiwanese military could not possibly do. So I think it's to serve to enhance the economy of scale and scope, but at the same time it's to make an alarming signal to the Taiwanese people. Don't be complacent. The Chinese are flexing their muscle, so be alarmed. So that's the sort of message that President Lai wants to tell to the Taiwanese. Indeed, the whole of society approach has a signature of the president.
Right. And what opportunities or risks does Taiwan's integration of private sector intelligence and surveillance capabilities create for Japan-Taiwan security coordination?
Well, Japan-Taiwan security coordination, I, for one, I think should be enhanced, but the degree of such a cooperation is minimal at the moment. So no matter what one of the small civilian aircraft companies does or does not in Taiwan with the military forces of Taiwan, it would not affect that much, like it or not, the thinking process of the Japanese defense planners. But at the same time, more broadly, there must be better communications, better sharing of information and intelligence in a creative way between Taiwan and Japan, or among Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and so forth. It's easy to be said, but very much hard to be done, because the Chinese are going to coerce in any way Taiwan and the Philippines, Japan, and so on, if those countries would be engaged in sharing intelligence and information more into the future.
And building on your answer, Dr. Taniguchi, as you mentioned that better communication is necessary and intelligence sharing is very important. But slow, do you think Taiwan is slow in progressing and integrating reliance on civilian military cooperation? Do you think it can resist Chinese curbs or Chinese these kind of surveillance attacks on East China Sea near Taiwan and amid increasing tensions in East China Sea?
Which is the reason why the whole of society approach should gain even more salience and importance for the Taiwanese people. You're looking at a behemoth in your neighborhood, which is China, and there is going to be no match between Taiwan and China. So the Taiwanese can still do much, much more in engaging people of all kinds, companies of all kinds. Some might remember that when Falkland War erupted, Margaret Thatcher's government, Margaret Thatcher, called upon private companies to do their utmost. Responding to that call, Peninsula and Orient P&O and BOAC, now BA, have provided aircraft and ships and so on with the UK's military. So Taiwan should read the playbook of Margaret Thatcher.
Right. And lastly, Dr. Taniguchi, what challenges does Taiwan's whole of society defense model create for democratic oversight, national security, and planning for Taiwan?
Certainly, Taiwan is a proud democracy. Open and accountability would be very much important for anything to be conducted. But the most important thing, the first, second, and third most important thing for Taiwan is to maintain its security. Everything else is secondary.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi for joining us today from Tokyo and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we stay in China. China has successfully completed its latest satellite launch according to the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. Along March, a 7A Korea rocket has lifted off at 8:20 p.m. local time from the Wancheng Space Center Launch Center in Hainan Province. The rocket carried a Shijian satellite, which was built by the China Academy of Space Technology and delivered it into preset orbit. While officials did not disclose the satellite's specific functions, they confirmed it was part of an ongoing series of experimental spacecraft. The Long March 7A has a lift-off weight of 573 metric tons and can send a 7-ton payload to geosynchronous transfer orbit. Now we move on to Indonesia. Indonesia is urgently searching for more than 400 people who are still missing after devastating floods and landslides have hit Sumatra nearly a week ago. The death toll has climbed above 440 people, and many of the missing are feared buried under the mud and debris after Cyclone Senyar swept through the region. Aid is being delivered by air and sea, but some remote villages remain cut off, with residents reporting no assistance and even stealing as food and water run out. Malaysia has sent medical supplies, and Starlink is providing free emergency communications. Across Southeast Asia, heavy storms this month have devastated parts of Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Sri Lanka, leaving more than 900 people dead. In the Philippines, the disaster has triggered major political turmoil, with public outrage over corruption linked to missing flood control funds, putting President Ferdinando Bongbong Marcos Jr. under intense pressure as protests escalate. And that's a wrap on the China Report. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.